Braithwaite's crime, shame, and reintegration theory explains the value of a label, but criticizes how the label is used once the individual completes his or her punishment. So Braithwaite says that we must shame offenders, that labeling process, that shaming of offenders has a function in society. It is central to social control. It identifies the behavior as inappropriate, and it invokes this feeling of remorse. However, once that individual is labeled, the individual should be reintegrated, not outcasted from society. By reintegrating the offender, the identity of that offender is preserved, so the label has less of an impact. The offender is also able to reconcile with the community, and the offender is able to maintain bonds that they had prior to the punishment, which means they can also create bonds. So Braithwaite described that there are those societies that shame and stigmatize, and those societies that shame and reintegrate. The societies that shame and stigmatize are disorganized societies. These societies have many of the same characteristics that social disorganization theorists identified. Do you remember those theorists? Sean McKay, Sampson and Groves, Sampson, Rodenbush, and Earls. These societies lack communitarianism, meaning they are not cohesive, they do not have social capital, they do not have collective efficacy, they're often heterogeneous, and suffer from many of the isms: racism, ageism, classism, etc. These societies take the offender and outcast them. They cut the offender off from their interdependencies, which means they are less likely to have access to legitimate means of success. They are more susceptible to criminal peers, and the criminal label becomes the master status. These societies suffer from higher recidivism rates. Those societies that shame and integrate are communitarian societies. These societies are enmeshed in interdependencies. In other words, they depend on each other and recognize the value of that dependence in communal success. There is mutuality and trust in those communities. The individual who is reintegrated is able to maintain bonds and strengthen pro-social influences. These societies have less recidivism as a result. So the key here then is to reintegrate. Again, shaming is valuable, but we must reintegrate. Shaming and stigmatize actually causes further criminal offending. So you read one example of the harms of stigmatization. So Tewksbury's study of sex offender registration explains how the U.S.'s sex offender registration and community notification procedures has specific collateral consequences that impact the likelihood of reintegration and can potentially increase reoffending. So sex offender registration and community notification has caused individuals to withdraw socially, has increased anxiety and stress for those offenders, has caused them to lose jobs, has caused them to be denied promotion at work, have made it more difficult for them to find a place to live. And once they found a place to live, many of them lost their housing after their offense became known. They have been harassed and they have been assaulted. All of those are common precursors to reoffending. Other collateral consequences include them being treated rudely in a public place, being asked to leave a business, losing a friend who found out about their previous offense, receiving harassing telephone calls, or threatening and harassing mail. So this study demonstrates how sex offender registration and community notification further stigmatizes and separates these offenders from mainstream society, giving them no hope for reintegration. Braithwaite would highly criticize the treatment of sex offenders, and in fact he has. Instead, he identifies policies for all offenses, not just sex offenses, that could promote reintegration. Specifically, those programs are restorative justice programs. Restorative justice programs restore the harm done to people and community. It puts the victim first, and it allows support for the offender. In a restorative justice program, the offender and the victim go through a restorative justice conference in which the offender can explain what happened, the victim can ask questions, and together the victim and the offender can reach a consensus on how the offender can restore the harm caused. Often restitution is involved. In the conference, the offender will be there, the victim will be there, and the state often acts as a mediator. But family members and community members, if the victim and the offender permit it, can also be involved. This allows the offender to be reaccepted by the family and the community. This increases justice, increases victim satisfaction, and decreases recidivism. I provide some examples on which you will write for your discussion board this week on restorative justice programming. I look forward to reading those. If you have any questions, the Q&A and email are always available for you to get in touch with me.